of the Bears. We're determined and we just don't care who we play or who we maul. Our team's gonna rule them all. We're proud and we're tough, not stopping till we've had enough. We're mean, we're on the prowl. Our team's gonna knock them out. Everybody's gonna scream and shout. The red and blacks are gonna make us proud. So beware of the Bears.
Yeah, my father, Harry McKinnon, had a great influence on me. For a starter, he used to drag me and Mum along to all the football games when I was a kid. I probably started going when I was 4 or 5 years old, and used to go to North Sydney Oval, and you know, I was a North supporter right from the word go.
Well, in 1970, I was playing for Eastern Suburbs in Brisbane. Came out of under-18s the year before and into grade. We made the semi-finals, and the story goes that Roy Francis came to Brisbane to watch a guy called Lenny Dittmar, who was playing in the forwards for first grade for Brisbane. They were in the first grade semi-final, and I played in the reserve grade game. We made the grand final the week after. He came up. We won that game. Next week he rang me up and said, "Bruce, we'd like you to come down and play in Sydney." Dad and I came down, had a look, had a chat. We signed. My very first night of training was torrential rain at North Sydney Oval, and knew no one, and Roy said, everyone just do 20 laps. Well, I felt like packing up and going back to Brisbane. But I think the major shock was that Roy had a dispute with the committee and was on a boat back to England before the season kicked off. Merv took over as captain coach, and as I said, I was very young and I was pretty inexperienced as a second row because I'd only played for about 2.5 seasons in the back row. Merv broke his arm and he only played a handful of games.
Merv Hicks, another Englishman to come out with North Sydney, and another giant. I don't know where they got him from. He was actually, I think he was the second biggest man I've ever seen besides Hugh Mills. Merv was a good ball distributor, a tough competitor, and a lovely guy. I've had the opportunity to meet him after football, and I find Merv an excellent fellow.
It was a bit devastating to me because we lost more games than we won. And I'd only played rugby league for 3 years, under 17s, 18s and reserve grade. We won 2 grand finals and lost 1. So it was a bit of a shock to be in a side that was beaten more times than we won. I think we had an ageing side, and well, the majority of players were ageing. We weren't fit. They didn't take it seriously enough. And I had a lot to learn with second-row play about who to run off, and I couldn't create as many gaps because we were playing against far superior players than I'd been used to playing against, playing against a host of internationals every week.
I think the 4-tackle rule really stood out, that it wasn't going to be a success, and the 6-tackle rule was certainly opened up a new ball game, which you could tell brought the fans back and made it a faster game and a more spectators game.
Well, I was playing in 1971 with Blackpool Borough, which is no longer has a team. But we had a good team back then. We had a few players who'd toured Australia, and I was playing pretty well, so I got a few offers, including Norths, and I'd been over there 3 years, so my wife back then wanted to come home, so we came home, and I worked it out when I came home, but I ended up at Norths.
Well, it was a marginal improvement, 1972 on 1971. We had Timmy Pickup, and I think we got Keithy Outen and Brian Anderson, another front row. So we had some additions, but we'd lost a number of players from the year before, and the problem was that we had, I think, perhaps a coach that didn't really want to be a coach in Merv Hicks at the time, and I think, with those additions of those players. But there was a lot of shuffling. There were a number of injuries. Players were in and out. And the other problem that we had too at North Sydney was that we never had any great depth. We had a fair percentage of very good players in first grade, but once you had one or two or three injuries, we just never had the staff or player staff to kick on and convert more than the odd one or two wins.
It was like we were heavy on with big forwards, like we never got beaten in a blue, but we needed some more backs, and it was never the right balance.
One particular game that stood out, it's the hardest game I've ever played in, it was mud from one end of the field to the other, and the first 10 minutes, it was when they had the English players, a lot of the English players, Jimmy Mills and all of those. I ached after about a quarter of an hour. My body ached, and theirs would have been the same, I'm sure. But we ended up we ran away with it. We just got a few breaks, but I'd say that would have been the hardest game that I've ever played. Just to pick your feet up in the last quarter of an hour was just like running a marathon. It was just so hard, but it was just what you had, the usual, playing against North Sydney when Manly played North Sydney.
Jim Mills was about 17.5 stone and could run. He made a break right down the middle of the ground, and the only person standing between him and the goal line was this McLean, and he stood there, and you could virtually see his legs shaking because Jim Mills was going to run right over the top of him and bury him in the ground. But he pulled a hamstring as if somebody had shot him about 10 metres before he got to him. He went down like a shot elephant. It was almost funny. It wasn't so sad at the time. But he was a very tough player. He was a very hard player. But as I said, I don't think Sydney ever saw the best of Jim Mills.
We had a rule with him at Newtown: don't upset Jim. And what we'd do, we'd never try to niggle him, upset him, give him cheek or anything like that. Just let him go through the game. And if Jim was happy going through the game, we were happy.
In 1972, we started the season well, and I got in Sydney seconds and played well, so I got in the state side and went on and got in the Australian side. And George had not, he might have been in the Sydney side, but he wasn't in the state side, and he was just sort of out of the blue.
Well, George Amblin was another lovely fellow. He was a pleasure. George, everybody loved George. He'd had a long career. I think he was in the latter part of his career when I joined North Sydney in 1971. But he still was playing great football. He could score tries. He had legs like tree trunks. He could run. And everyone, as soon as the ball would go out, they'd just say, "Give it to George, give it to George." But George was a lovely fellow. He was a very good player. Yeah, I was proud to play with George. He was very good.
You've got to remember that in those days things were a little bit different than they are now, you know. And Acker Forbes and Harry McKinnon were two great friends of mine. We often shared a few sherbets together. And I was talking to them one day and they said, we're looking for a coach for the seconds, you know. I said, oh, I don't know. Anyway, they told me and got me half full of ink one night, I think, and I said, oh, okay, I'll give the seconds a run if you're desperate enough to try me as a coach, non-playing coach, because I'd been a coach at West a captain coach for about 4 years. And I mean, there's a hell of a difference between a captain coach being on the field and a non-playing coach, I can tell you. So I really wanted to try out the difference, I reckon. So I went to North, and Merv Hicks was the coach. Now Merv and North were in a period where they were in that downer sort of a thing. They just never had that match winner that could put the ball over the line and make his job a lot easier, you know. And I think Merv had just about had a gut full of it 3 parts through the season, you know. And he said to Acker and Harry, well, I believe he said to Hank and Harry that he'd had enough at the end of the year, so they said to me, do you want to coach the first? And I said, oh, you sort it out with Merv, you know. And to my mind, there was never anything. Merv moved on and I took over coaching the first.
Well, he put a lot of discipline back into North Sydney, and he had a few good years there, Noel. I was a great admirer of Noel Kelly as a coach. I reckon he was a top man.
Well, my former years, I was actually a soccer player, and I only started playing rugby union when I was 18, and that was with my university, which was a place called Loughborough. They were a very good university side, and really I developed from there. Playing hooker, so I never got out of the front row, unfortunately, and I played then for Coventry once I'd left university, and went on to play for England in rugby union. I think the reason I looked to change to rugby league is because my final game of rugby union was at the International Sevens up at Murrayfield for England, and I'd had a particularly good tournament there. And whilst I was playing cricket in the summer, Wigan Rugby League directors came and saw me and said, would you like to play rugby league? And if you'd like to play rugby league, we'll give you £7,500. Well, I'd never seen a game of rugby league, but the £7,500 was very attractive. And the reason it was is because I was earning £14 a week as a teacher at the time. And I tried to get a mortgage to buy a house for £6,000, and the bank wouldn't give me one because they said I wasn't earning enough. So I'm afraid the reasons for going were purely mercenary, and that £7,500 bought me a new house and a new car. So here I came to rugby league, and I'd never seen a game before I actually played it.
Well, Noel Kelly took over as coach in 1973. And I think comparing his coaching ability then to the coaching aids and training that goes into coaches nowadays is probably a little unfair. But and I never saw Ned play, of course, Noel Kelly play, but I believe, and I've seen some clippings and footage, but he was as tough as they come. And I think Ned approached coaching in exactly the same way. There was no subtleties with Noel Kelly. You could either play or go and join the second grade coach.
This match has one of the most sensational openings in the history of the code. In a flare-up of violence, Gleeson's is flattened by Orchard, and watch Kelly of Australia, number 11. Referee Pearce has an all-in brawl on his hands. He's quick to restore order, and with a firm decision, he sends off both the offending players, Orchard number 10 and Kelly number 11, with the match less than 2 minutes old.
I had to bring a toughness there. There had to be a toughness brought into Norths. But I did overlook the fact that there were players there who were good players, but they weren't tough players. You know, they were receivers. They'd get belted, you know, and they wouldn't hand much back. And I refer to Bruce Walker. Now, Bruce Walker was as good a player as you'd ever want in your club. You know, there's no doubt. Played for Australia, went to the Kangaroos. Good player, terrific player, you know. But God, some of the things that used to happen to Bruce Walker, everybody in the place used to belt him, you know, purely and simply because Goldie just wasn't a belter, belting them back, you know. And of course, my old saying was retaliate first, you know. Like, I mean, you got to, if they give you one, you got to give them one straight back, or you're a rat shit. They'll stick with you the rest of your life, you know. Mm. But they don't want to know you if you belt them back. Mm. So this was my first bit was to toughen up. And if you toughen them up in their game, you'll toughen up their defence. Mm. And you'll build their confidence too if blokes aren't getting stuck into them, you know. Mm. So that was where we basically started.
Yeah, I can remember Noel Kelly one year saying to me before a game, Bruce, I want you to bash this guy and you know, take him out of the game and knock him out. And I said, no, I don't know how to do that. It's not me. I can't do that. I've got to play play the game. I'll play it as hard and clean as you like, but I can't just go up there and hit somebody for the sake of doing it. So, but that was the kind of player Noel Kelly was, or the kind of coach that he was. And admittedly, his heart was in it. He was in there. I thought sometimes he'd have heart attack, but we had a lot of success, not as much as we should have.
It was unbelievable. Peter Inskip signed in '72 from Canterbury for $3,000 a year, and he really had a good year. Played every game and played well. And we beat Canterbury. He kicked a field goal. Do you remember that? We beat him 19-18 and kicked a field goal with no time left. Anyway, he had a good year. So he wanted the same money to stay, and they offered him too. This is North. And so I said to Harry, like, he had a good year. And Harry started bringing up these statistics that, like he said, do you know he never missed kicking the ball out from a penalty once? Things like this, all stuff. I said, so why aren't we keeping him? And anyhow, Barry Glasgow in '72 had a lot of injuries, but he really came good in '73.
In '73, we had the likes of Brian Anderson, who came with a player called Eddie Heatley. They were bought as a package deal. Eddie was supposed to be the better player, and he was a good player, Eddie, but Brian Anderson, Puppy Anderson, was what we needed. He had plenty of starch in him, you know, he was as tough as anybody I've ever seen. And he brought something with him that had been lacking in the North Sydney side for years.
Barry Glasgow was captain in '73. It was like he'd been at the club longer than me.
Yeah, Keith Houghton was another one. Keith Houghton, ex-Balmain player, excellent player. He was terrific for Norths. And they were the players who were no giving them, you know, and of course they took all our younger players along with them. And we had some damn good young players around North, you know, but we always needed those couple of extra blokes with a bit of starch in them, you know.
So I started my rugby league career in September 1973, and then I was obviously seen by selectors, and just after Christmas I managed to get into the Great Britain side, which I was very surprised about, and others, of course, in my Wigan team were saying, what's this bloke doing playing for Great Britain when he's hardly played the game? But they just wanted somebody in there who took the ball up and tackled, and that's what I was basically doing at the time.
In the Kangaroos in '73, you get friendly with everyone kind of thing, but you have your own particular mates. But I spoke to a few guys about coming over at North. We started going well in '73 towards the end, and we had a good year in '74. This was at the end of the '73 season while we were over there. So I had about 5 of them. I had Ray Brannigan, Jeff Starling, John Lang, and a couple of others that they said, yeah, well, we'll come and have a talk to North. So I got back and I got onto ACCA, and ACCA said, well, tell them to give me a call. And I said, that's not how things work. You just actually ring them up and say, you know, make them feel like you'd like them to come here, and nothing ever happened. So that was that, same old thing.
Tim Pickup, '74. Well, if you didn't make him captain, he wouldn't play. He was totally uncoachable. How do you like this, Grub? And he was nicknamed to suit, you know, so who would argue with a name like Grub for a nickname? He was a good player, Grub. He was an excellent player. Kangaroo. What more can I say? He was one of those little fellas that could break the game up by chipping over the top. He was a talker, and he was tough too. He was a tough little fella, and him along with Keithy Houghton, they were a good pair of halves. And of course we had a couple of other little kids there too. Gary Pretty was one, and they were good fill-ins too. You know, they were all good kids coming along at the same time. But Grub was he was good for the club as well. You know, he had a great friend in ACCA. Acker and Grub got on terrific, like 2 tiger snakes.
Well, 1974 followed up, as I said, with the inclusion of players like Tim Pickup and Keith Houghton that have been here now for 2 years. We had Keith Harris in the centres. We had Roger Lavis joined us, and Roger Lavis was a very very tough second row forward, very young but very strong and hard. We had a pretty fair side. But I think the main success there was that we trained pretty well in the off season. As I said, we had a pretty fair side. We trained well, we were fit. We had good pre-season. We struck Manly first up at North Sydney Oval, first game of the round. They'd won the premiership 2 years in a row. And I can remember Noel Kelly going through the program prior to the game, and there was something like 11 internationals in Manly side. Yet, according to Ned, none of them could play, and all we had to do was go out there and just put it to them. Well, we ended up winning that game something like 27-15.
In that game, something happened. I'll never forget this. That I always used to have trouble with Ian Martin. He's a really good player and a big guy, and so things were different back then. There was this all in blue that started, and I said, right, I go up and I said, I'm going to rip into Ian. I thought, like, he's a bigger guy than me, and he's sort of, I don't know how he can fight or whatever, but I thought I can give it to him and it'll get broken up before it goes much further, right? You know, so, and anyway, that was going to happen. It was all going to be on, but there was just one thing that stopped me, and I spoke to Terry Randall the next day. We used to have a drink down the Time and Tide Hotel at Dee-Why on Monday night, all the different players, and Terry got sent off in that game. And just on the way in, Ross Warner hit Bill Hamilton on the chin, and it was like they just cut a great big hole in the ground. He just disappeared. It was like he just got whacked over the head with a baseball bat, and that stopped me dead. And Terry Randall said, yeah, I saw that myself, you know. It sort of stopped the whole blue. Everyone thought, I don't want to get onto one of those. So, but it was the same old thing. Roscoe somehow managed not to get seen, not to get sent off, and didn't go on about it, but he didn't start many blues. Things were different back then, but he finished a few.
And I can remember at half-time, we came in and we were in front, and Noel Kelly, I think he didn't know what to say because we were playing so well and defending, and we'd scored tries, and the crowd was going berserk, and it was just a great feeling to knock them off. Everyone, I think thought it was a bit of a fluke. After the Manly game, we played West, who had a very good side, and we drew 18 all. And then we had a narrow 7-2 loss to Newtown, who also had a very good side. Then we played East, who eventually went on to win the competition that year.
Oh, it was a classic. Ned got the program out. He went through their team, which they had the team from hell. From Russell Fairfax to Bill Mullins and Jim Porter, John Brass, I think it was Mark Harris and John Peard, and he went through the whole team. The whole team were just a bunch of cats. It was funny, when he went through the whole team, the first guy he got to that wasn't an out-and-out cat, like he'd say, here we are, Russell Fairfax is a cat, Bill Mullins, a cat, John Brass is a cat. And he just went through the whole team, and he got down to Ron Coote, was a show pony. I always say to Cootie, like, you were the first guy that got an upgrade, and then they went back to being cats. Even Arthur was a cat, I think, Elwyn Walters, and he said, so they're a bunch of cats, just go out and give it to them. So he went out and beat them, and he said, I told you. So, but we also had game plans and things like that. I mean, Ned was a good coach.
They had scored some unbelievable number of points in the first two games, yet we kept them tryless, and we won. In fact, I scored the only try in that game. I always remember that game at the sports ground.
We had a guy out there called Mick Healy, God bless him. He's a big, strong, strapping young bloke, and big, strong jaw and everything. On a couple of days' growth on Mick, and he looked like a bloody gorilla. So anyway, this day I said to our little halfbacks, Arthur beats and throws a lot of balls on the ground, and I said, Mick, your job is today you've got to belt him whether he's getting it, belt him whether he's got it, or belt him whether he's just getting rid of it, Anyway, he did. And Mick was one of those players who could run a bit hot and cold, and he could also run like a hare. He was a big, strong and fast player. Anyway, this day he followed Artie round and he drove Arthur Beats and nuts, and Arthur was throwing them on the ground, and we had my little halfbacks around the back there picking it up, and away we'd go, you see. And I think the day we beat them, we also had a bit of luck with the goal kicking. I think Bruce Warwick kicked half a dozen goals from the sideline. but we don't care how we got the points as long as we got them, you know. So, and this particular day was probably the best game of rugby league that Mick Healy had ever played in his life. And after the game, we had a drink back under the stand, and I was talking to Arthur, and I said, "How you going?" And he said, "Who was that bloody big ape you put on to me all afternoon?" And I said, "Oh, just a local lad over there that turns up every now and again, you know." And Arthur said, "Jesus, he never left me alone all bloody day." So if calling them all cats was the answer to Grub, well, that was different. It surprises me that Grub could remember that I'd done that, because he's never listened to a coach in his life, so at least I've got through to him there as well, you know.
We had, as I said, a very good year. We played, I think, I was looking back through history a while ago, I think we only lost about 3 games or 2 games in that first round. Unfortunately, I suffered an ankle injury and missed 7 games, which also ruined any chance I had of playing representative football during the season.
Changes in both sides for South Sydney, playing today without their captain Bob McCarthy. 3 changes. Halfback Bob Grant is replaced by Barry Woods. Second rower Herb Timms replaced by Bob Bolden. And front rower Brad Jones replaced by Bill Sawyers. 3 changes, 2 in the forwards and 1 at the halfback spot for South Sydney. For North Sydney, also 1 change. This change is in the forwards. Chris Mason, the second rower who was named during the week, has been forced to withdraw. His place has been taken by the former New Zealand player Eddie Heatley, who returns to the North Sydney pack after injury. Second kick for South Sydney now to be taken by Piggins. Sawyers. Piggins. It's Woods. Withers. Sate going down the blind side. Sate caught. That was a good tackle from Warner, but good run too.
Paul Sate will be looking for a big game today, considering the test selections coming up tomorrow night.
And his test teammate, Gary Stevens, also needing a big game today. Woods, that's Heeden. Good long pass out to Mooney. Mooney is quick. Mooney will score for South. Good try, South Sydney. First points of the match, a tremendous try scored by Tom Mooney.
These fellows are smaller, naturally they'll get tired tackling these big fellows as the game progresses.
Healy. Lavis. Harris. Another good tackle, good defence. Sawyers, number 13 that time. Warner. Outen. Anderson. More good defence. Healy, though. To Warner. Pick up. Moritz. Outen. Long one again. Harris dummying. Now the last tackle coming up. High kick by Warwick. It's gone straight across field. Plenty of South Sydney players there. Burnett looking for it. North's getting it back too. Tackle count has started again. Anderson. Lavis. Burnett. Dave Burnett, a former rugby union international, and he's got a lot of things to show us yet in rugby league. Pick up. Anderson.
It's very good the way Dave Burnett stands back and runs hard on the ball, as you'll notice as this game goes on.
That's Heatley. North Sydney pressing the South line now. 2 tackles to go. North could be hard to hold out though. Out to the centres. Good try, George Varela. Lovely try. It had to come. Scored by centre George Varela for North. Levelling the scores at 3 points all with the conversion attempt to come.
Well, there we saw just an example of just what I was saying a moment ago. The inside backs have been floating across the field a little bit, but we had a fellow coming hard onto the ball, and he's hard to stop when he gets the ball. A good try by North Sydney.
North still with the ball. Warner. Playing it to Lavis. Anderson. Outen, Moritz, over the top of the head, out to the winger to Hope. Hope showing a lot of speed. Good tackle in the last effort though. Woods it was, the halfback. Anderson.
South's becoming a little bit lax in defence now. They're waiting for their partner to do the work, and consequently neither is doing it.
And the two South Sydney players penalised there by referee Bruyers were lock forward Sate and 5'8 Withers. That's a better looking kick. In fact, that's 2 points. 5 points to 3 is the score after 15 minutes of play in the first half. North Sydney in front by 5 points to 3. The kicker was Bruce Warwick. Play it to Woods. Long one again. Stevens losing it. North ball. Harris trying to run around Eden, but taken by Moylan. Moritz. Lavis. That's Anderson. Warner getting a pass to Healy.
The North Sydney forwards as a pack are looking much better than South, both in attack and defence at this stage of the game.
Pick up. North Sydney captain looking for support, running away from it though. Moritz backing him up. Moritz over the quarter line. North's on the attack. Pick up. Healy and Outen looking for support. It's there. This is better play from North Sydney. They haven't shown us this sort of form for a long time. Akeley, a long pass. That's Lavis. Outen. Lavis again, reversing it to pick up. There's an overlap this side if they want to bring it across. Heatley. Now only one tackle to go. Moritz's dummy half. Short kick. It's high though. Flying through is Burnett and into touch in goal. 15 minutes to go before the break. Warwick attempting the penalty goal from beyond the quarter line. He's got that one. 7 points to 3 in favour of North Sydney. Just on 15 minutes to go before half-time. Sims putting it down into touch on the full, and that's a penalty to North Sydney on halfway. And if Bruce Warwick feels so inclined, he can have another shot for goal from here. We'll wait and see the decision from Timmy Pickup. He's in fact going to give it to Harris for a shot at the touchline.
That's a good decision by Tim Pickup. That kick was possibly too far out. Get down there in the south quarter and put the pressure on.
And that was certainly a very good kick from Harris. A very long punt kick indeed for the line, and Warner will take the second kick inside the South Sydney quarter line. Anderson.
It's good to see these North Sydney forwards getting back deep and running onto the ball.
Lavis, Heatley, reversing it. Harris to play it. To Warner. Outen, Lavis, Healy. Lavis still has it. Outen, Anderson. 2 tackles to go. Pick up. Harris. Almost straight through. He's over the line. Can he ground it? He has. It's a try. He didn't look as though he was going to be able to ground that, but in the end he did. Referee Bruyers right on the spot. That's the score.
Well, bad defensive lap by South Sydney. Pick up, waved that ball around for fully 4 seconds. He showed everybody he's going to give a dummy, and then they watched Harris as he strolled over. They must tighten this defence up.
Warwick once again attempting the conversion. Not a difficult kick. He's got another 2 points to make it 12-3. 12 points to 3. 12 minutes to go before the break. Second kick now to be taken by Piggins, midway between the quarter line and half. Woods, Withers, Sate almost got through there. About 7 minutes to go before half-time. Norths are leading 12-3. Eden, that's Boland, running wide from the second row. Sawyers. Ball won by North. Burnett. Varela.
There we see again how South have possession, but they needlessly give it away with a silly pass and not hang on to the ball as they go to the ground.
Lavis sending the overhead pass to Moritz, who picked it up beautifully. To Hope, Houghton, pick up. Lavis still getting the ball back, and it's Norths in attack with Varela caught, and Burnett, who's backing up tremendously well today. Dave Burnett having, I would say, his best game since turning to rugby league. Pick up, Houghton, Heatley.
All these North Sydney players are hungry for work. They can't get into the game enough, and they're all running onto the ball.
Healy. Healy got out of that tackle. Now one tackle to go. Let's watch pick up, number 6. It's going to be another of the players they're putting it into the air.
North Sydney are very tradesmanlike in their performance. Souths are hurrying their game, and consequently we see drop passes.
Withers unloading it to Sims. Up to halfway, out to Moylan. Crashing cover defence from Keith Houghton, number 7. Mooney. Sate. Good backing up, but the pass astray. Still a South Sydney ball.
South will rely heavily on Paul Sate. It's just a pity that Bob McCarthy isn't in there to come off Paul Sate when he makes these runs.
Withers. Stevens. Eden on the North Sydney quarter line. One tackle to go. A chance now for South. Sims calling for the ball. There he is. And knocking on. No mind, though, the penalty. A penalty has been awarded to two Souths, with the North Sydney defence coming up too quickly. They anticipated that kick from Sims, and they ran through accordingly. So 12 points to 3. Eric Sims going to attempt the goal. Mr. Reliable in the South Sydney district. Making the score a little bit more respectable for South Sydney before half-time.
Apparently Tim Pickup thought that Paul Sate reefed the ball from the player's hands, and he had a word to the referee, but the referee was right on the spot and just noticed the ball was dropped.
Scrum set by Houghton. North Sydney ball. Reversal of play to Moritz. Jim, the presence back in the side today of Ross Warner really must have helped North Sydney.
Must have been a very confidence booster for North Sydney. Ross Warner is a great hooker, but as I said before, not only a good hooker, he's a very good ball distributor, a very good dummy half. He has a look before he passes the ball and makes sure he throws it either one way or the other, open or the blind, or the blind side, whichever is more favourable. A very good dummy half.
So North's in possession, midway between the South Sydney quarter line and halfway, playing it to Warner. Healy. And the ball won in the play, the ball by Piggins, but it was knocked on. What bad luck again for Souths.
What an eager beaver this Piggins is for Souths. He's always trying, never off the ball, trying something different, and he's a very good hooker to go with it.
Withers. Souths have the ball on their own quarter line. Sims. O'Donnell caught. Penalty is against Owen O'Donnell. Warwick attempting the penalty goal from just beyond the South Sydney quarter line. It's not a hard kick. And he's got it. 14 points to 7 is the score with about 25 minutes to go. Woods showing a lot of dash to get through that gap. Out to Withers. Withers will score. It's a try for South Sydney. Withers is in. High kick by Moritz. Ball lost, and a North Sydney ball, Burnett. Pick up, Outen, Lavis. He lost the ball, Eden for South. Mooney.
What an exciting game this is developing into. Both teams now throwing the ball around and they're jumping on any mistake made by the other side.
Eden playing it just inside the South's half, the North's half. Stevens, Sate. Pickens getting it back to Stevens. Boland with it. To Woods now. Sawyers to play it. Woods, Withers. Getting it back again, Mooney. Nice low tackle from Varela. One tackle to go. O'Donnell, Sims. For the line. Hope can't take it. Scrum going down just out from the North Sydney line.
This Eric Sims is magical with this boot. He can just put it on 5 cents, and he did not give that winger a chance to catch the ball.
Pick up to Burnett. Here's a chance for North now. They've got an overlap as it goes out to Warwick. Good backing up. This is Varela. Varela almost away. No support back there for him. What a great game this has been. Play going from one end of the field to the other. Norths are attacking now. Out to Outen. Putting it back to pick up. In fact, that movement went so quickly that it left behind a lot of North Sydney players right down the other end of the field. Now they're all bunched. Lavis. Tackles running out.
One player who didn't leave behind, Alan, was Gary Stevens, who's away back there covering.
Anderson now. Norths have 2 tackles to go. Pick up to Harris. 1 tackle to go. What will Norths do here? Warner dummy half, getting it out. Quick passing. Anderson, he's caught. Good defence. So with about 2.5 minutes to go, Norths must win this ball from the scrum if they're going to have any chance whatsoever and run it down to the South Sydney goal. Souths, on the other hand, have only got to win it to win the game.
Ross Warner will try every trick he knows in the book and possibly even run the chance of being penalised.
Harris. Looking for Moritz. An overlap on the far side. Moritz out of that tackle. Almost out of the quarter line. Playing it to Warwick. Pick up. Outen. Hope. Pick up. Warner. Outen caught, put to the ground. Tackles running out. Heatley dummy half. Pick up. Moritz. Two tackles to go for Norths. About a minute to go. Pick up. Will kick here. And they'll have to follow it through quickly. Sims waiting for it. Harris underneath it. Knocked it forward though. So did Anderson. So the last scrum of the match will go down just out from the South Sydney goal line, and the South Sydney supporters are having heart failure.
But I must tell you, the one game which was supposed to be my big trial before getting selected for the Great Britain Tour to Australia and New Zealand in early 1974, I had to play against Big Jim Mills. And he and I were both props at that time against each other. And Jim thought it was between him and me to go on the tour rather than perhaps both of us going. So he gave me a really hard time. I mean, he's a bigger fella than I am, and his fists are the size of buckets, and he was hitting me with everything. So, of course, I had to try and hit him back and have a go at Jim, because otherwise, you know, if you're seen to laid back, there's no way you were going to get on this tour. So I came off with a shellacking, but I got Jim a couple of times anyway. But following that and getting on the tour, it was... I didn't know really what a tour of Australia, New Zealand was going to be like, and what the standard of play was going to be. And I must admit, it started off as a bit of a holiday, because we left Manchester at 3 degrees and arrived at Darwin, of all places, and it was 37 degrees. And when you got off the plane, it was like being hit with a dry blanket. The heat was something I'd never felt before. And we had to play in Darwin. Then we moved across to Cairns, and they took us out to the Green Island in these lovely boats, and then gave us snorkels and goggles and left us there for the day, and we got burnt and then had to play next night, and we didn't want our shoulders to be touched because we were red raw. And but again, we played the games and came down the coast and went to Townsville and Maryborough and Rockhampton, and you know, they were nice, easy games for us. And our next stop after that was Brisbane, where we had a tougher game against Brisbane themselves. And then we got to Grafton, and that was the first time where we met Kevin Humphreys. And Kevin Humphreys, he came and addressed us, and he told us in no uncertain terms, and we weren't really expecting what he was going to say. And Kevin said, you better start pulling yourselves together and start bringing yourself together as a unit, else this tour is going to be a flop, even though we'd won all the games so far. He said, we've got a strong Australian side. You haven't seen any of them yet, but unless you improve your standards, this tour will be a disaster financially for you, and your reputations are at stake. Well, we were quite incensed about that, but he was correct, and he was right. And we did pull up our socks, and we did start shaping up a bit. We went back to Brisbane, lost the first test 12-6. Very, very tough game. We then went further on to Sydney, and we knew it was a do or die in the second test. And we came out on top by 16 points to 11, and so it made for a great finale.
Before a very large crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground on a perfect winter's day, bright sunshine, a clear blue sky, the ground in perfect order, the third and deciding rugby league test between Australia and Great Britain. Australia won the first test in Brisbane by 12 points to 6. Great Britain kept the series alive by winning in a most determined fashion the second international here at the Sydney Cricket Ground by 16 points to 11. We now find the stage set for what should be an exciting, deciding test. Australia have made a number of changes in the side that was beaten in the second test side, and Great Britain, if anything, a little bit stronger than the side that they fielded in that match.
Thank you, Alan. Well, it's bound to be plenty of stick early. Both teams will get stuck right into the issue from the onset. They seem to have a licence to do this when rep teams meet. But as long as we don't get any vicious play ensuing, well, that's the name of the game. They will test each other out. It'll be like two prize fighters gaining each other's respect. Once this respect is gained, well, the teams will settle down to play football, and I'm sure the crowd here today, a wonderful crowd, wonderful conditions, are in for a great game of football.
But first, the Great Britain side, Maurice Richards is in on the wing in place of David Redfern, with Les Dill in the centre taking the place of Dave Eckersley, who played in the second test here in Sydney. Also new to the forwards, Terry Clausen has come back from injury to take his place in the front row. A very strong side, a stronger side, I think David had to agree, than that which took the field in the second test. Mr. Whitlam being introduced to the players by Mr. Kevin Humphreys, the president of the Australian Rugby League, and Mr. Reg Parker, the manager of the Great Britain touring side. Colin Dixon, number 9, being introduced. Now, the Australian team, while we're looking at the Great Britain players, contains 7 new players from the side that was originally named for the second test. Graham Langlands returns at fullback. Lionel Williamson and Ray Brannigan are the new first-choice wingers. Tim Pickup in preference to Jeff Richardson at 5'8". North Sydney 5'8", Tim Pickup coming out. Now 12 metres out, one tackle to go. Gradonicus out to Beatson, keeping the ball alive to Williamson. Langlands is with him. Langlands going for the far line. Chisnell across, getting it to Williamson, who scores. First try of the match. Pick up down to the quarter line and dumped by Dixon. Timmy Pickup was put down that time. Colin Dixon standing there looking at the damage he's done. A very hard footballer. And as you can see, he's trying to urge on his fellow forwards to give as much. Gray, Clausen, Chisnell, long pass out towards the centres. Hesketh coming back in field. Charlton up from fullback. Good switching of play by Great Britain. Charlton away. Charlton to Hesketh. Hesketh accelerating. Williamson across to drag him down. Gray. But still it is. He'll score. First try to Great Britain. Nash. Clausen. Gill got a well-timed pass away, but it was intercepted by McCarthy. McCarthy racing for the line. He's going to be too fast. He's a specialist at that, and it's played off again.
He has a wonderful understanding with his half-back partner, no matter who it is. And, of course, the fella is always capable of doing something different.
Clausen, a hard man to stop, and he's caught with O'Neill moving in and immediately being involved in the action. And you saw what happened with Terry Clausen being called upon to play the ball, and O'Neill moved in to put him to ground. But although this kick is a long way out, it's a very valuable one for Great Britain if they can kick it, David.
Well, that's very true, it is, and it's just before the half-time hooter goes anyway, and the thing is this, we haven't got to be lulled into any sort of these tactics now at all. We've got to keep away from it and use the ball as often as, you know, we possibly can, because there's no doubt about it, if we do start playing football as we can play football, we can win this test match this afternoon.
John Gray attempting the penalty kick. He's almost at halfway, and what a beautiful kick. It's long and high, and it's there. A great kick from Johnny Gray. 10 points to 9 the score. Clausen will kick. No, he won't. Nichols, Nash. It's Gray, caught by Fulton. John O'Neill to be spoken to for that one. We may have a look at that in action replay. We didn't see whether or not that connected or not, but the intention was there. That was quite evident. John Gray, nevertheless, is confronted with quite a long kick, something of the order of about 45 metres, and that kick long enough under ordinary conditions, but when we have such a blustery wind as is prevailing today, it's even more difficult. You'll notice that Gray even has a fair amount of difficulty in being able to stand the ball straight upright. With 2 minutes before half-time, Gray attempting the kick, another good high one, another beautiful kick, and Great Britain in front again. John Gray kicks another goal. Gray, another high kick, the forwards chasing it up. Brannigan running in to help Langlands. He might have to take it himself. Lost it. Here's a try. Is it a try? It is. Gray has a very difficult kick once again, but he's kicked very well under the conditions today. But he can't get the ball any further out than this. He's about 2 centimetres in from the touchline, right on the quarter line. Gray putting it well into the air, and it's a 6-point lead at half-time. What a magnificent kick he's turned in today. Brannigan. The Australian crowd now sensing an opportunity for the Australian team to score. Turner, O'Neill, Beatson. Coote was wide. Coote to the corner. Charlton to beat Langlands. One tackle to go. Fulton calling for it behind play. There he is. Didn't get time to kick. He'll have to run it. Away from Dixon. Fulton.
looking for support. There's Cronin. Cronin over the quarter line to Coote. Coote going for the corner and he's in. He's there. Roger Millwood, recognised as one of the liveliest 5/8s in the game, and referee Keith Page doesn't quite understand that he's the replacement man. He is now. And John Gray going to kick for goal for Great Britain. The penalty awarded beyond the quarter line and almost straight in front. His only consideration will have to be the effect of this breeze on the ball.
I think this is a very wise decision, because if this is converted, it means that we are only 4 points behind then, which means a try and a goal can still clinch it in these closing stages of this test match.
John Gray will attempt to draw the points a little bit closer now. It's not a difficult kick. He's kicked a lot harder ones than this. And that's his form. Australia in front, but now by only 4 points, 22 points to 18. John Gray kicking goal number 6. Full-time siren sounding. Scrum won by Great Britain. Millward. Play on. Cronin is caught, and that is the end of the game. And the series won by Australia, and a jubilant captain coach Graham Langlands going out on top at the end of such a triumphant career. Graham Langlands over 100 points in Test Rugby League matches against Great Britain, and captain of the side to defeat Great Britain 2 tests to 1 in this 1974 series.
But it was a super series. It was saved by, as far as I was concerned, Kevin Humphries turning around and saying, "You fellas have got to pull up your socks, else you're going nowhere."
We were well in the top 4 or top 5 for the whole round. It was only in the latter part of the year that we lost a few games, and I can recall the game that we got knocked out of the 5, and that was the second last game of the year against St George at North Sydney Oval. And the thing that beat us that day was Graham Langlands was playing fullback, and he went off injured. They switched Teddy Goodwin from centre to fullback at half time. He came out and destroyed us in the second half.
We beat North Sydney at North Sydney Oval and put them out of the semis. But we came back into the dressing room, and Graham Langlands, who was our captain coach at that particular time, admitted, he said, that is the best team that he's ever played against in North Sydney since in his career. And they were the words he said, and he said, if that team stays together and moulds as a team next year, he said they'll go pretty close to winning the premiership. Now that was the words of Graham Langlands, who was one of the greatest players the Lace to beat.
And we had to beat Parramatta at Parramatta, and I think it was Wests and Saints or Wests had to beat someone else, you know. And you're not going to, and we weren't favoured to beat Parramatta, but we did, and we did a good job on them. And we thought, you beauty, we're in. And I think it was the other side got beaten, and it tipped us out just by that point. So we were pretty unlucky there, and we'd had a damn good year, and well, we had our best year, and things were looking real good, you know.
Halfway through the year, I said to Acker, I said, why don't you start signing these guys up? Because a lot of guys are coming off contract, and then it'll be the same old North. They'll go here, there and everywhere. And so they messed around, didn't sign anyone up. And at the end of the year, North came and made me an offer, which wasn't much of an offer.
Well, I've only played for 2 clubs. I played for Tamworth City. I played about 100 first grade games for Tamworth City. I came down when I was 25, and I finished when I was 37. So I don't know. I like North Sydney. I like the area. I like the people I played for. I like the administration. So what more are you going? My wife was happy.
And so I started doing with Ken Irvine's a friend of mine, so it was just like he said, they'll give you more than that, you know, and so once you sign, and then everyone will sign. I said, no, I said, like, if they sign the team, we'll have a good team, but if we don't, it'll be the same old North. So I'm not going to, we agreed I agreed on less than I got to go to Canterbury, but I said on the proviso that you sign this team. Well, everybody left, the lot. The whole team disintegrated. It went from fullback Derek Moritz to Bruce Warwick, nearly everybody you've named went. They didn't sign them up. Chicker out and Brian Anderson, I think Roscoe retired. And when the whole team had gone, I said, well, I'm going, and then I'm the big bad guy for leaving, but I would have stayed for less money. And, you know, if Ken Irvine, God rest his soul, was here. Anyway, I think that's known. And so when I went over there, I just really became the villain. When I said to Peter Moore, I said, look, there's a kid over there that you want to get hold of, Keith Harris. But when you get like, and then he's ended up at Canterbury and I'm the bad guy, but this was well after the season had finished and they still hadn't signed Keith up. Like, who's at fault there?
While I was signing on one hand, you know, Keith and Tim Pickup were signing with Canterbury on the other, and Keith Outen had left us, and I remember Tim saying to me afterwards, Tim Pickup saying to me afterwards, you know, you should have waited because Canterbury wanted to sign you as well. Well, I don't know that I would have still gone, but I don't regret staying because in 1975 I ended up playing for New South Wales. Perhaps success in semi-finals might have come earlier, but I was still perhaps, if you like, naive to think that Norths would buy players to eventually get us to a semi-final.
But, and of course, Acker and Harry had been there a long time, and Acker had a little way about him that if he didn't like someone, then wouldn't matter, hell and high water wouldn't make him make him an offer, you know, so, and him and Grove got on, as I said, like two tiger snakes, so, but he was probably being fed a bit of the backwash off the undercurrent, you know.
Manly had me on an option, and Mr. Arthurson decided not to take it up, and so I retired. Kevin Maher was on the committee at the time, and my boss asked me to go over and have a talk with Acker Forbes, the secretary, and I couldn't. I was going on a cruise. January, came back and they started the pre-season training, well into that, and just about the end of the pre-season. And I signed with North Sydney. And it went from there, but I was a long way behind.
I came to North Sydney by virtue of talking just before I left Sydney to a couple of the players, one of them being Tim Pickup, and he said, are you interested in coming over to Australia in the off-season or for a period of 3 years? I said, yeah, certainly I would be. I said, it's a nice place. You know, the club football is great. I'd certainly be interested. So he put the seed into my mind. But when I got back to the UK, I actually had an offer from Eastern Suburbs, and Jack Gibson and Artie Beetson came over to Wigan to see if I'd go over there. But at the time, Wigan put a huge price on my head, and you know, Eastern Suburbs said that's just too much money. When it came towards the end of the season, North Sydney had come back then, and Acker Forbes gave me a couple of calls, and each time he called me I said, Acker, what time is it? And he said, it's lunchtime. And I said, yes, it's lunchtime in Australia, it's 3 o'clock in the morning here. And I say to Acker, Acker, I will come to North Sydney if you promise never to ring me at your lunchtime again. Which he didn't, and we sorted things out, and off I was coming to North Sydney. But it was a different North Sydney to the one that I thought I was arriving to.
I just had 4 years at St George, 71, 2, 3 and 4, and the 13 import rule came in, which then sent players that were playing at other clubs prior were sent back to their clubs. And my club then was like North Sydney, so 13 import rule. Now that is the club wanted you. If you wanted to go back, it was a two-way offer. And so I went back to North. I was keen to get back to North because At that particular time, I thought, well, I'd like to finish my career there, back with the club that I started.
1975, yes, I think that was a very nervous time for me because I'd only been in the game just over a year and a half, and I was still learning a lot about the game. I first had to overcome training sessions at North Sydney. I'd never been through some of the training sessions that David Cooper put me through. In fact, there was a couple of times I disappeared around the back of the big fig tree, and I was very ill, very ill. And also over the fence, and I would disappear as much as possible on some occasions because I just wasn't used to the amount of physical exertion in a training session.
John Gray came after about 3 or 4 games, and with his famous round the corner, I reckon he's the guy that invented it, really. Round the corner kicking.
When I came over to Australia and joined North Sydney, the players were quite bemused how I kicked the ball, and they often try to do it themselves, but those fellas who never ever played any soccer couldn't get the movement of the hip, of the leg swinging round. It was just something that was alien to them. And then it came round to the game on the Sunday, and it was, you know, well written up obviously against Balmain. And I went out to the pitch, and it was rock hard, and I only had these boots with the big sprigs on, so I knew I was going to be in trouble. I put plenty of wadding inside my boots because I thought I'd have real problems with blisters and getting used to the heat. And we played the game anyway. It was, you know, it was a tough old game, and there was a good crowd there, really big crowd. And I remember us getting a penalty, and it was about the 40-metre line, about 10, 15 metres left of the post. And we decided we'd take the kick for goal. And I've lined up, and the whole place is a hush. And I'm just standing there thinking, shit, John, I hope you kick this. Please strike it well. Well, I did, and it sailed over, straight over, and it was one of those things I'd gone, yes, thank goodness for that, the pressure's off a bit. So after that, I could relax.
Barry Wood was an asset. He set up a few good tries and scored a few good tries for the club. He was a good team man too as well, good club man, and we all got on particularly well. But we missed a couple of good faces there, you know, and of course Grubb, you missed players like Grubb that can put the ball over the line.
When I came back and so I'm captain of Canterbury and I'm the bad guy because I left North, and so whatever anyone says, like, Canterbury is my club because they treated me well, whatever, but I'm still a bear. But it doesn't matter. When you play your own club, anyone who says that's not a special one that you really want to win because it's your own club is lying. So out we go, and all the guys are still mates of mine, particularly Bruce Walker and Rex Murphy and guys like that. So in that game, we got penalised 14-2 in the first half by Laurie Bruyers. He sent Norm Thomas off after 20 minutes or something, and we beat him 56-4. So I definitely enjoyed that. But then when we played him at Belmore, by that time I'd injured my knee, and North, this is North forever, came over and beat Canterbury, and they were good value for it. So.
No, I remember one particular incident playing against Manly, and I'd had a clash with Malcolm Brearley and Terry Randall, and I'd got a gash above my eye, and it required stitching, and so I was taken from the field, and I was straight in the dressing room, and Noel came in and had a look, and he asked the doctor how many stitches it required, and he said 7. He said, good. He said, stitch him up as quick as you can and get him back on the flattick. So that was the Noel. Like, he was a tough man, and he expected his players to be tough.
In 1975, I believe with a little bit of luck, we could have made the semi-finals. but I still believe that the 1977 was the side that should have made the semi-finals, without a doubt.
1976, we did have a little altercation in the pack with the Newtown front row. It just came from a couple of clashes of heads, and then for some reason the game had been boiling a little bit anyway, and that was just a spark that made the whole eruption of the 25 players who went in and had one almighty scrap. I think there was only one player who wasn't in that, and that was Mal McLaughlin, who was seen leaning on the goalposts, watching everybody else with his arms folded. It was a good melee, and nobody got hurt, but that was also the first time that the video replay was used for suspensions.
In 1976, I think, was just about as bad as 1971. I think once again in 1976 we finished 11th or something like that. I can remember Rex Mossop writing in a paper once in 1976 that you know, he could no longer take North Sydney as a serious football team, because we just lost game after game after game. The only success that we had in 1976 was the night competition, the AMCO Cup, where we ended up making the final against Balmain. Unfortunately, we lost that as well, but it was a final.
Very hard when you got a side that's not good enough, and you're pushing and pulling, you pushing them all the time, you know, like, and then you lose a couple on the trot, and you could see us falling back into the old North Sydney. And of course, that was the depressing part, to think that we were going to slip back to what they were like before I went there. And if anything, and I said to Acker and Harry, then give me a flick at the end of the year, I'm out here, you know. So.
I was approached by Parramatta, and a very good friend of mine, Mick Cronin, was instrumental with their coach, and I'd agreed to play for Parramatta in the 1977 season, but I did say that I would give the courtesy of going back and speaking with Harry McKinnon and Acker Forbes and the committee, and then I'd ring him straight at home and just tell him yay or nay. But I felt so much that I owed North Sydney that much. So I went that night, and then they offered me the captain coach's job, and I thought, well, I've done mostly everything else. I've never coached or a side. So I rang Terry Fernley and said that I'd decided to take the captain coach's job at North Sydney, and he wished me well.
I think the biggest single stress on a captain coach would have to be that he's the coach telling everybody this is the game plan and this is what you have to do to win. Well, as a player, even though he's coach and captain, but he's still one of the players, his form has to justify his position in the side. And I think that's the biggest, or was the biggest stress on Bill as a captain coach, that he wasn't getting any younger, and he had to get out there and perform every week to justify him telling all of us players what to do and to do this and, you know, keep going with blood on your hands, etc. Well, he had to be able to do the same thing, and to his credit he did, because, you know, Bill was one of the most wholehearted players I ever played with or saw. As I said, he was big, but he had good ideas with game plans, and he had good structure with training, trying to create ball skills amongst players, and players like Bill Hamilton, I think, you know, finally brought out in me, once I made a break, you know, what to do with the ball. Don't just try and beat the whole team on your own, but, you know, look for somebody else to pass it to.
I played with Bruce Walker at North Sydney from 75 to 77, and Bruce was one of the most outstanding ball runners that I've played with, and I've played with some pretty good ones at Manly, but Bruce was exceptional, very quick, but in 77 I believe he had his best, not because I was the captain coach, but I introduced a couple of things. But I had him a third receiver, third runner, and this allowed to show up his expertise in breaking. He was running wider. It would be a 3, bang, 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 and Bruce would get the ball third, and being given an opportunity to show his wares, running into halfbacks and 5/8 instead of running into front rowers and second rowers.
Yeah, Bruce Walker was a great player. Gee, he was a good player. I watched him on North Sydney Hill year after year, and he'd make break after break, and you'd just sit there and say, why didn't someone back him up? In 1977, I'm playing with him, and I said I was never going to let him make a break without me being on his coattails.
In 1977, we played the final of the pre-season. We played Eastern Suburbs, and Her Majesty the Queen was there, and we were presented, but I had to go up, and I had my false teeth. I had the trainer with my false teeth in my hanky. And as soon as we had to go up, I slipped the teeth in, otherwise she wouldn't have understood it anyhow. But then I've gone through, and I was quite upset us losing the game because we had a chance of winning it, and went through, and I'm introducing the players.
I put out my hand and I said to her, I'm one of yours in actual fact, you know. She said, yeah, are you? And I said, yes, I am, and I've had to come 13,000 miles to meet you. And she giggled. And then Prince Philip heard the same thing. He said, oh, please, where were you from? I said, I was from Coventry. And said, oh, well done, nice to see you over here. And that was it. But it was very nice. I actually talked to the Queen.
But when the Queen was talking with Johnny Gray, I needed an interpreter because, you know, a couple of problems together that's I couldn't understand Jay Gray most of the time anyhow.
I played under 23s for 2 years. Didn't play any other grade, just stayed in the 23s. We're a fairly hopeless team, really. We didn't win one game in 1975, and I think we won 2 in 1976. But despite all that, I managed to get a run the next year, and I went straight into reserve grade, and I ended up playing the first couple of first grade games in that year, 1977.
You remember, I was the eldest in a family of 9 children, and he was the youngest, so that it was fairly natural that I was fairly protective of him. And when he first started to play football, it used to really worry me. I used to think that he'd get knocked about. That was until I went down and saw him playing a third grade under 23 game down at North Sydney Oval, and he got involved in a blue with David Grant from Balmain, who was a big lump of a fellow like Don. And after that, I thought, well, he's big enough to look after himself. He acquitted himself fairly well. And
first grade game, I think me, John Adam, and a bloke named Ken Potter all played our first grade game in the same match. And consequently, I had a pretty good game, and I got a run the next weekend against St George, which was my first premiership game. I played one of those league-a-thon games. I used to have 3 first grade games at the cricket ground, and I played in the league-a-thon game against Saints, and they were a pretty good side then. 77, they won the premiership actually, and they gave us a bit of a touch-up. I think they beat us by about 10 or 15 points. Played another first grade game against Penrith towards the end of the year, and there were some more injuries. And 78, from 78 onwards, was first grade all the way.
In 1977, captain coach, I changed quite a few things with the coaching and that, and I put into practice a lot of things that I thought were good from other coaches who I'd been trained under, coached under.
Bill used to really give us our own heads as far as the way we saw the game, the way we played it. I mean, we had a good forward pack at that time. People, you know, such as Bill, and we had Brucey Walker and Rex Murphy, and we had, you know, a good, quick pack, which was big, and used to dominate most of the scrums for scrum possession. So we always used to get ourselves a heap of good ball, and from that we used to grind down a lot of sides. We got backs who were reasonably quick, and when we decided to give them the ball, usually in a good position, you know, they often made good inroads.
I believe no side were real keen to play us in the second half of the competition that year, and we went pretty well through. And there was just a few things that I won't go into, certain things that happened in games that certain players know they did certain things wrong that cost us dearly, and that's what missed us the semi-finals. But I believe if we would have got in that year, got into the semis, I think we were steaming pretty well. I think we'd have been hard to beat, and a lot of sides were pleased that we didn't make it.
I approached the committee at the start of the pre-season for review. In hindsight, they said no, we'll sign you at the end of the year. Manly approached me, made me a good offer, said we want you and John Gray, and I said okay. And by the time North came around to coming back and offering me all sorts of money to sign again, I'd already signed with Manly. It was too late, and unfortunately that was just typical of North Sydney over all the years that I played there, with the way they couldn't hold players because they never looked more than 1 year ahead.
It was only late in the season. I'd spoken to Norse, and Norse had come up with a couple of offers, and in fact I asked them to make a final offer, and they had promised certain things which I was waiting to get and hear from them to be written down, but they were never written down. And Bruce Walker was a slightly different situation to me, but I know that previously Keith Harris, when he left North Sydney, he'd been offered certain things that were supposedly to be written down, but they stayed verbal, and Keith Harris had the same fundamental worries as I did, and that these things would never come forward, and I'm sure they wouldn't have done.
Barry Wood was a tremendous halfback. I don't know why he didn't get the accolades as being one of the best halfbacks, because he just had a super pass. He had that torpedo pass either side, 20-25 metres, and he had a short game. He was fast and he was tough. And when he left in 77, or at the end of 77, I think he was one of the most significant people leaving. And in 78, when we started going backwards, it was predominantly because of we hadn't filled that position.
I re-signed for the 1978 season as captain coach, and with the understanding that we had retained all our playing and our playing staff, because believe it or not, one of the main things that I wouldn't have coached there was my reserve grade coach, Harold Blinkeron. When I was captain coach, he more or less assisted so much that I couldn't have done the job without him. And but the thing is, I signed for the 78 there with the understanding that I was retaining my players, and we would be able to buy a couple of other players who I felt we needed. And when it came to fruition, we'd lost, I think it was 15 or 17 of our first two grades, and had to start from scratch all over again.
Acker was in the old school, and he was a tough guy. And I remember my first contract negotiations, called into his place in Willoughby Road, and in through the corridor, and Eunice was in the back getting a cup of coffee, and yeah, young fella come in here and into his little study, which was full of jerseys and vitamin tablets and tracksuits and footballs, and a little desk was in the corner there, and he said, "Sit down, son," and he said, "This is what we're going to offer you." And I'd played first year of first grade in 77, hadn't got a contract, and 78, my first contract ever, and he said, "I'll offer you $6,000. And I thought I was worth a bit more in the market at that time, and I haggled a little bit and told him, I'm a junior and I want to play here, and I thought I've had, a good season. And he said, "Son, I love you." He said, "But son, if you don't sign by the end of the month, go look for another club." So next week I signed, and I later found out that he'd actually been authorised to offer me more money than he offered me, and that he'd just done a deal. So that was Acker. So probably Acker's use-by date was finished by about 78, and Ken McCaffrey comes in, and yeah, Ken was good. He's a good man, Ken. Very honest. My last couple of years, I never had a contract. I just shook hands, and that was all we needed to do. And Ken brought a bit of professionalism, and I think for the development of the club, he was very, very good.
Bruce Foy was a very good organiser around the rucks, and as a hooker, he was complete. He's a good team man. Was a great assistance to me when I was as captain coach.
He was a good captain coach. Yeah, we had a great time under him. We used to play a lot. We used to play a lot of touch footy at training, and the circuit to playing a lot of touch football was to let Bill score a few tries. So therefore, we let Bill score a few tries to keep the touch footy and, you know, not get into the hard stuff. But no, he was a good captain coach, and yeah, he was a good guy, and he also had a bit of discipline there. He, you know, he'd pull you in the line if you're doing something wrong, and you know, if you missed training, he'd drop you. He did that to me once. He was a very good player for a young guy like myself coming up in the first grade to be there with him.
By the time we got going, the second half of the competition, we were starting to go, and they had a midweek competition for the sides that didn't make the semis, and also the first side knocked out of the semis was included in it. And we went through, and we won it. We won our last, I think it was about 6 or 7 games of the season, and we won the Challenge Cup.
We got on the field on the final against South, and we just put it together, and we had a great game. I think Russell Hunter got set off sometime during early in the second half. We played a man down, and South were finishing well ahead of us, obviously, in the season. But we knuckled down, and a memorable try was scored by John Vandenberg. It was a clincher of the game, and we'd pressed. We were on our own line, and I think Donnie McKinnon made a little bit of a half break, and he threw it to me, and I went through a gap, and I drew the fullback on the 25 and threw it to Johnny Vandenberg, and there he went off. And Johnny Vandenberg was a great athlete, and he was quick, and the cover was coming across. There wasn't another North Sydney player within 50 metres of him when he crossed the line, and we're going, go Vandy, go Vandy. But we won the game, and even though it was only an Also Rans Cup, you know, we won something. It was good.
That was my last game, and they'd appointed Tommy Bishop just around about that same time, about 6 weeks before, and so we won that, and I finished on a winning note.
Tommy Bishop was a great player. He was a nice guy, I liked him, but he had a couple of problems, Tommy. One thing he couldn't do was communicate with players.
Well, the main problem with Tommy Bishop in 1979, I think he came to the club and, you know, we were all young guys coming up, and we enjoyed the year before under Bill. And the guys just didn't like him very much, you know. He was a yappy little guy, sort of a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and don't mistake me, you know, don't mistake me, he was a fantastic player, and he probably would have been a very good captain coach. And, you know, got Cronulla to the grand final in '73.
Some players by the end of the season had barely said a word to him all year. And but the other thing Tommy had wrong was that he coached a team as though Tommy Bishop was playing, and he coached a team as though he had himself on the field. And what happened was that we didn't have Tommy Bishop on the field. We had a whole bunch of new kids in the team. Very young team, good team, but we didn't have a lot of old heads. We'd lost them. We'd lost Brucey Walker and John Gray. We'd lost Barry Wood. We lost Timmy Murphy. We lost Rex Murphy. And suddenly we had a whole bunch of young players, and 79 was a disaster.
On the subject of North Sydney Club, Tommy Bishop is the last of a long line of coaches who've aged prematurely trying to turn the North Sydney players from koalas into grizzlies. Tommy is with me, and in 1973 you turned a young team of men from Cronulla into frenzied killer sharks who gave the ultimate winner, Manly, the toughest match of the season, and a big fright before they won 10-7. Why couldn't you do the same with the North Sydney boys?
Well, one of the big things, Rex, was I was still playing then. I was a captain coach. Probably if North Sydney would have had a captain coach this year, it could have been a lot better. They lacked an inspiring leader. But also in '73 we had a very young side with players the calibre of Rogers, Greg Pearce, and Ken Madison and Cliff Watson. And it was a pretty good side. It was just the start of Cronulla, that was. And I knew in the week leading up to that particular game that we was in with a big chance.
But you turned them into almost supermen that day, Tommy. They, you know, that's one of the toughest and roughest, and even, shall we say, well, bordering on the, you know, non-rugby league games that I've ever seen.
Well, I think grand finals always are, and you've got to expect and put as much into it as you can.
Well, was that much difference between a group of 13 players and another group of 13 players?
Yes, there was. At Cronulla, that the boys, as I said, they was good players. I'm not knocking the North Sydney players by that, but we were short of a few top-line players there. And I think North Sydney have, over the years, got so far and yet become losers because they just don't have that little bit at the finish.
Is there something in the club, Tom? I mean, you've been there. Is there something in the some deep rift in the executive which filters down to the players?
I think so. They've always been losers, and I think it's psychologically in the back of the mind that they are. There is a faction there for sure. There's a power struggle. Hopefully Ron Willey can overcome that, and I hope he does, because that is a big problem.
Well, you had, would you say, an unhappy year there? I think you aged during the season.
Yeah, it was very unhappy. We by the same token, we had about 10 games where in the last 10 minutes we had the games won.
But North do seem to invent ways to lose, don't they?
Well, there's a different one every week, and it was amazing how it kept coming up.
Did you leave or were you pushed?
No, I had quite a few problems. The travelling from Cronulla was a big problem. And also...
But you knew that when you took it on, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. But I didn't really believe that would be a problem, and it turned out it was.
Travelling backwards and forwards when you're a loser is different to travelling backwards and forwards when you're a winner, is it?
Well, that might have been a bit too, but I believe as a coach you've got to be on tap to be able to get individual players, get them down on the paddock, away from training, try and iron things out which you've got to do, like, you know.
Well, Tommy, have you got any words of wisdom for Ron Willey in 1980? He's taken the mantle of coach.
Well, maybe if I had that answer, I'd have stayed there. I think Ron's got to be very strong. He's got to take control of the whole situation. He does need an inspiring leader. That's the big thing. I think North Sydney have got to get a good captain who can play a bit of football himself and be on the field there. Because they have got a lot of good young players. Young McCaffrey, unfortunately lost Paul McCabe through, I believe, bad management. But they do need an inspiring leader, a fellow who's going to be on the paddock showing them the way. Because as I've just stated, they have got some good players there.
There was something about the crowd and the other supporters, and there was something about that beautiful oval, even before it had gone through its architectural transformation, that it just made it it was just such a fantastic community feeling of being part of a community that the football was almost secondary in some ways. And you know, even growing up and when North were going through a period where they weren't winning very often, it was still for a growing an adolescent. It was still the major centre of social contact. You know, it was where you could go and meet your mates, and as you got a bit older, it was where you could go and flirt with girls. It was where you could go and watch the feats of your heroes and things like that. So it became a social club in itself, the ground, apart from the social club that existed elsewhere. And just that tremendous feeling of community, I guess, was what really converted me.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I think I was probably an example. I was married very young. I was married at 20. So happy to be married at 20 to a beautiful lady, and had my first child when I turned 23. And I think that happened with a lot of my friends. And I think perhaps the 70s was, youngsters like myself, we got married younger. And it wasn't whether you were going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 children. It was that you were going to get married and worried about the house and the mortgage and children down the track. Whereas I think in the 90s and now into the year 2000, it's planning for how many children you're going to have and where you want to live, and don't get married till later because you can't afford a mortgage till we're all 27 and 28 and 30, and I think that's probably the major difference.
Dad was an inspector of flammable liquids and explosives with the mines department, and he got the British Empire Medal for services to the mines department. But a funny sidelight to that was that the medal was presented to him by Sir Roden Cutler, and when Dad went up to receive the medal, he said he just gave him the medal and congratulated him, and then they talked about the fortunes of North Sydney Football Club for about 5 minutes.
Can that be seen? Can that be seen? That will go in the ashtray. Secondly, I'd like a pretty member of the audience. Can I go and pick one? Is that all right? Oh, God, there's some beauties here. Hands up, come on, the girls. Can I go? Oh, I've got one. Now this lady, I'm afraid, has got to expose herself. She's not going to? She has exposed herself. Now, the second part of my act. This $2 note. Sorry for the first one. Have you seen this note? Are we watching? Now this gentleman, zubba zubba dooby doo, I will expose this onto you. This note, with Amco written over it, as we saw, gentlemen,
take your hand. I will take this and try and transpose it onto this young lady's arm.
Hey, what about that?
They won the toss a couple of times, but Chris Luckman is one of the brighter notes on the North Sydney horizon.
Are you lonesome tonight? Are you lonesome tonight? Are you sorry we drifted apart? Do your memories stray to a bright summer's day when I kissed you and called you sweetheart? Do the chairs in your parlor
Here is the Brisbane Grand Final played at Lang Park last Sunday.
and bed?
Johnston, Naylor on the left. They're 10 metres out from the 22, a penalty to North. And it's developing into quite a stoush now. The entire match is erupted, with players exchanging punches all over the field virtually. There's about 5 or 6 groups of players. Meninga is still involved with his centre opponent, Peter Dutton. And the brawl is continuing now off camera to the left. Our cameras have picked that up for you too now. And what a stoush. What a stoush. Oh, I don't think I've seen a brawl like this in rugby league since I think it was an AMCO Cup between Newtown and North one day.
Yeah, some ugly incidents out there, and I think the players should wake up to themselves. This is not what football's about, and it's not what the crowd have come to see.
Your parlor seem empty and bare. Do you gaze at your doorstep and the picture of me there? Is your heart filled with pain? Shall I come back again? Tell me, dear, are you lonesome aware of the Bears. We're determined and we just don't care who we play or who we maul. Our team's gonna rule them all. We're proud and we're tough, not stopping till we've had enough. We're mean, we're on the prowl. Our team's gonna knock them out. Everybody's gonna scream and shout. The red and blacks are gonna make